There we go. Call to order the February 28th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Bobby, call the roll, please.
Joan Kovac. Marianne Edge.
Here.
Richard Kloskowitz.
Here.
Derek Lewis.
Here.
Darlene Smith.
Here.
Paul Fisher.
Here.
Fred Stacer.
Here. Okay, tonight Paul Fisher is sitting in for Carlene Coleman and Marianne Edge is sitting in for Tundra King. And with that, we'll move on to the next item. The next item on our list is our traditional moment of silence. So if you would be silent for the next 30 seconds, please. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 24th meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move they be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the January 24th meeting. Are there any questions, comments, changes to the? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on the approval of the minutes.
Joan Kovac.
Yes.
Derek Lewis.
Yes.
Marianne Edge.
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz.
Yes.
Darlene Smith.
Yes.
Paul Fisher.
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, and with that, the next item on the agenda is individuals testifying tonight need to be placed under oath. So if you're going to testify at this time, would you stand and be sworn in by Bobby?
Yes, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First item on the agenda is Zion Mission Easement Abandonment, P&Z 23-27505 on Northeast First Avenue. Yes. Mrs. Dolan in for Mrs. Barshevsky. Thank you very much.
I'll be covering for Maggie tonight. This is a request for a 12-foot wide utility easement abandonment. The easement has been was a platted perimeter utility easement. However, the construction of I-95 resulted in this remnant triangle parcel where this easement is no longer relevant. There are no utilities located within the easement, and there has been no objection to the easement abandonment to date. Two of the service providers, Comcast and AT&T, have not yet responded and will be encouraged to do so prior to City Commission approval. The review standards for an abandonment are, number one, the easement is not now or in the foreseeable future of any benefit to the city or its inhabitants, and two, the abandonment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff has determined that the above review standards have been met. Staff provides the following alternative motion for the board's review. Alternative motion 1, recommend approval to the City Commission as the board finds that the easement abandonment meets the required standards with one condition. The applicant will submit the 2 remaining service provider letters prior to City Commission. Alternative motion 2 would be to table this abandonment request to allow time for the applicant to address any issues raised by the board staff or the general public. And staff recommends alternative motion number 1. And that concludes our presentation. Both staff and the applicant are present if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions of staff before we move to the applicant? Seeing none, does the applicant want to make a presentation or say anything? And if not, that's fine too, whatever.
No, I don't see any need to comment, really.
Okay. So, does anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on this item. Yeah. Sir, I'm sorry, just for the record, can you come up and stand here, introduce yourself? I have to ask you one question.
Yes, my name is Michael Holland.
And your address, sir, for the record?
2721 Northeast 11th Terrace.
Thank you. So on this item, the first, if we adopt motion number 1, it's an approval with conditions, and it has one condition, which says all outstanding letters of no objection must be received prior to the city commission hearing. Are you okay with that?
I suppose so. I mean, this has been forever because I got a variance on this a year ago, and then
Okay.
right before I got the variance, Scott told me, hey, there's this utility easement. So
Okay,
it's taken us a year to get from there to
Okay.
there, so.
that's fine. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were okay with that one motion. Okay, I mean, one condition. All right, and with,
Hopefully it won't take another year to get those 2 letters.
okay, yeah. Okay, with that, we will, let's see, I closed the public hearing, right? All right. Anybody have any last-minute questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 1.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mrs. Smith, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that the board finds.
Miss Smith, just your microphone.
I would like to make a motion that the board finds competent, substantial evidence has been presented for the easement abandonment that satisfies the review criteria and move approval of the item subject to the one condition provided by staff.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second him.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Bobby, call the roll on item number 1, please.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Marianne Edge,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 2, Pompano at West Atlantic plat. P&Z number 23-14509. Project address is 1500 West Atlantic Boulevard. And Mrs. Dolan, you're doing this one as well?
Thank you, Chair. Jean Dolan, Development Services. This is the proposed plat for an 8.6-acre property adjacent to the Wawa at the northwest corner of Atlantic Boulevard and North Andrews Avenue. The site has an industrial land use and zoning, and the proposed plat restricts the property to 178,000 square feet of warehouse use. 70,383 square foot warehouse currently on the site will be demolished. The plat includes a shared access for both the subject property and the Wawa from Atlantic Boulevard. This plat was reviewed by the Development Review Committee at the meeting on July 5th, 2023, and found to be in compliance with the city's land development regulations. Staff recommends approval of this plat with 4 conditions to be addressed prior to City Commission consideration as follows. 1, the plat cover page must be signed and sealed by the surveyor and signed by all owners. Number 2, the applicant must address the following, add the following note to the plat: all facilities for distribution, telephone, and cable shall be installed underground. Number 3, remove the August 2023 date from the top of pages 1 and 2. And number 4, ensure the plat reflects all the county DRR recommendations. That number 4 was added since the staff report was written because it was brought to our attention that some of those are still being negotiated. That concludes staff presentation, and both staff and the applicant are present if you have any questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions of staff? Seeing none, applicant? Presentation? No presentation? No presentation? Okay, you still got to get up and say whether you'll agree to the 4 conditions.
Good evening, Heidi Davis with the law firm of Gunster, 450 East Las Olas Boulevard, Suite 1400, Fort Lauderdale, 33301. Here for the applicant, and yes, we agree with staff's conditions.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question while you were here. 'Cause
yes.
when we were here last time, we were talking about the easement through the gas station. Has that been finalized?
They are almost done. Yes, Wawa and has agreed to it. They just are doing the paperwork.
Okay.
So it's more of this shared access to go in, and then they will come onto the property as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other
Okay,
questions?
thank you. Anybody have
you.
any questions of the applicant before she runs away? Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. Anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And with that, unless there's any other comments from the board, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 2.
I have a motion.
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
I'd like to make a motion that the board finds competent substantial evidence has been presented for the Pompano West Atlantic plat, satisfies the review criteria, and move the approval of the item subject to the 4 conditions requested by staff.
We have a motion. Do we have?
Second.
Second. Thank you very much. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on item number 2.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Marion Edge,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Good luck with the project. Item number 3, Aviera West Flex. P&Z 23-05506. Addresses are 1350 Northwest 31st Avenue and the adjacent parcel to the south. That's an interesting address. Adjacent parcel to the south, okay. Mrs. Dolan, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, soon that will have an address. So this is Aviera West at 1350 Northwest 31st Avenue, plus the adjacent parcel to the south. A request for allocation of 53 flex units for a 369-unit project. I've got a clicker now. I'm holding it.
Oh, man, you guys got
Right.
all the toys now.
All the Yeah. We
like
have
2
to give a
months
shout
after
out to our
Christmas.
new
What's
AV
that?
guys that got us this nice stand and a clicker.
Yeah, there you go.
Moving up. So Aviera West is on this parcel shown there on the east side of Northwest 31st Avenue, just south of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and it is on the Flex receiving area map. So it's, I keep forgetting I have a clicker. Ah! So it is eligible for Flex. I'm now way too far ahead. There we go. So all Flex unit projects that need more than 50 units are required to use policy 216.3 or 216.4 to generate their entitlements. This subject property is not actually subject to the limitation regarding deed restricted affordable because it is not within a half-mile buffer of an existing tax credit project. If you can see, it's actually this little red area that's in between 2 circles on Northwest 31st Avenue. So they don't have any restrictions in terms of how much affordable they can do, but they are choosing to do the roughly 15% required by 216.3 instead of 100% affordable. It's not a tax credit project. So the units will be deed restricted to moderate income, and it equates to roughly 15% of the housing units. So one of the first things we look at is the compatibility with the adjacent land use and zoning of the surrounding area. So what you see on the slide is the subject areas outlined in gray. And immediately to the west, there's B3 and B4 zoning. Now, what's important about that is it includes that hotel parcel that the county bought. If you recall, it was trying to get a Lupa to be industrial with a truck stop, and we were, horrified by that potential. And the county came in and bought it for affordable. So they're very likely to do a tax credit project there. So we're fortunate that this one didn't create a circle over that adjacent property to make that a challenge. So this is actually kind of working out really well. South and east of the site, that big piece of CF that's blue, those are 2 public schools. And actually that border canal that kind of wraps around the property is a really nice buffer to anything to the east. And then there's a McDonald's to the north. And what you want to look at on that little aerial I put on the slide is all the yellow dots are the parcels that we've already flexed out or are in the process of putting a residential flex on. So you can see we're already changing the character of Northwest 31st Avenue to be much more residential on the east side and trying to get more mixed use and residential on the west side as well. And that was one of the topics of the Northwest 31st Avenue Task Force, which we'll talk about in a minute. So our mixed income housing program is really kicking in with this project. They're pretty much using all the incentives we created. The mixed income housing program allows 1.5 times the B3 density, which is 69 units per acre for residential only projects using policy 216.3, and allows the P&Z to approve the flex units concurrent with the final site plan approval. So this doesn't go on to commission. You guys are the decision-making body on the flex in this case. And for that reason, we're going to do the presentation by the applicant a little different. They're going to present their site plan to you as part of the flex approval so that you have all the information before you make your decision on the flex. Then they'll just incorporate that presentation by reference into the site plan item, which you'll also hear separately so they can go through the conditions of approval of the site plan, but you won't have to hear the whole presentation again. So it's pretty much the same process that we use for a loop up and a rezoning that are going concurrent. So it's a familiar kind of process. So Resolution 22-185 is the policy that required anybody needing more than 50 flex units to use one of the county policies, 216.3 or 4, if they're eligible for that. And these do provide a density bonus for a modest provision of affordable housing units. The proposed project will be providing 53 deed-restricted moderate-income units, and thus the density bonus offered by 216.3 will provide 6 bonus units for every moderate-income unit that's deed-restricted for 30 years. So doing the math, to get to the 369 units, 53 times 6 gives us 271 bonus, or 318 bonus units, and when we add the 53 flex units, that gets us up to the number of units we need to create the project. This creates a savings to the city of 316 flex units. If they had been using 100% flex units, it would have really took a whole lot more of our flex units. The city has enough flex units to accommodate this project. After this allocation, we'll have 287 flex units remaining and 500 redevelopment units remaining. So I actually did the math on how much flex and redevelopment units we've saved because we adopted this policy that they have to use 216.3 and 4 if we give them more than 50 units. And right now, we'd be 11 units in the hole overall. We'd have 0 flex units, and we'd be 11 units short in redevelopment units for this project to go forward. So it was a really good idea to leverage those bonus policies because it helps future projects have access to flex and gives us a modest investment in moderate income housing at the same time. Okay, so now we're to the Northwest 31st Avenue Task Force incentives, which are also being used by this project. Ordinance 2022-62 is how we adopted the Northwest 31st Avenue Task Force recommendations, which gave us additional permitted uses in B4 on the Northwest 31st Avenue corridor. So they did not have to rezone B4 to use the mixed income housing opportunity that we adopted as part of that Northwest 31st Avenue Task Force recommendations. So they got to use a lot of the incentives that we created. We're thrilled by that. So the consideration for, or the criteria for considering whether you can approve flex units or not is number 1, it has to be consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comp plan. And number 2, it has to create a reasonable development pattern, which the primary criteria for reasonableness is compatibility. So we've kind of already gone through the compatibility aspect, and it does tick a lot of boxes in the comp plan. So all of our goals, objectives, and policies that relate to compatibility, into densifying corridors and getting mixed use in corridors where we have main commercial and protecting single-family areas really ticks all those boxes. And then all of our housing element policies that are focused on deconcentrating poverty and encourage mixed income development are definitely being supported by this project. So we have our recommendations and our alternative motions. Number 1 is to recommend approval of the requested 53 moderate income flex unit allocation as the board finds the application is consistent with the aforementioned pertinent future land use goals, objectives, and policies with the following conditions. Number 1, the flex units will be documented as approved on the development order for the final site plan for this project, which is being reviewed and considered concurrent with the flex unit request. Number 2, the declaration of restrictive covenants committing the 53 units to moderate income for 30 years must be recorded prior to issuance of the first building permit for the project. And number 3, if the building permit is not issued within 2 years of the approval date, the applicant must request an extension or of the approved flex units, or the allocation will become null and void. And that tracks with the 2-year time frame for a site plan as well. So that'll be those two will be tracked together. The second possible motion is to table this application for additional information as requested by the board. And of course, staff is recommending motion number 1. So first, we can take any questions or comments you have for staff. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the applicant will actually do their site plan presentation, so you'll have the whole picture. Then you'll make a vote on the flex. Then we'll open up the site plan item. You'll hear the staff's presentation, and then any questions to the staff or the applicant, and then you'll vote on that item separately. So we'll open it up to any questions.
All right, does anybody have a question on the flex for staff yet? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. West, I'm sure you had something better to do, like come to Broward County today, but it's okay. We're good, we're glad to see you. Oh, okay.
I just have a question. Maybe it's
Yes. go
surely
ahead.
more of a, I don't know, application documentation question. I noticed this application came in and when it was on the agenda with two folio numbers, it appears they have since merged them into a single one. I don't know if that matters for the record, but just an observation.
You said there was originally two folio numbers or something?
It appears they've since merged into a single one that ends in 30 on the application here.
They'll
It
do
also
that.
has also the two
They'll do
zeros,
that
so
after
just-
their
yeah,
project's approved.
yeah. If anyone's looking for it, that first parcel, yeah.
Oh,
Doesn't exist now.
okay. All right. You're up, Mrs. West.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Paula West. I am a Principal and Senior Land Planner with Plan West. Address is 10152 Indian Town Road, Unit 159, Jupiter, Florida. With me, I have our team, starting with Nicole Pastre, who is the landscape architect. Chad Edwards is the engineer, and Terrence Conley is the architect. We do have a representative for the owner, but he's stuck in traffic, so he's on his way. But he wants us to go forward.
Okay,
So, and we're here to present Aviara West.
sure.
So before I get into it, yes, we have already unified both of those parcels into one following development services format. Already been done. So we're one. So if the Aviara name sounds familiar, it's because this is the second of two Aviara projects in Pompano. The first one is actually under construction right now. It's at 1621 South Dixie Highway. It's at the southwest corner of McNabb and Dixie. And it's a similar kind of development in that there's multifamily and there's, in their case, there's mixed use on the ground floor. There's publicly accessible mixed use on the ground floor. This one, I'll kind of get into it as I go through my presentation. We are called mixed use under the zoning definition of mixed use, but it is, the office space that we're providing is for the owner as a headquarters. They are actually relocating their headquarters out of Delray Beach into Pompano Beach. So it's not technically publicly accessible a commercial space. However, we did design it so that if in the future anyone wants to come in and lease it, it is accessible from the right-of-way, I guess. It's facing the street. So the property is at 1350 Northwest 31st Avenue. We are in the Collier City neighborhood. We're 5.35 acres, and the north portion has already been demolished. And I already mentioned the unification. So some project stats, as Jean mentioned, in very, very good and clear format. We're providing 369 dwelling units with that commercial component that I mentioned. We are designating 53 of the units as affordable. Those are the 53 units that we're asking for flex allocation for. We do meet the lot area, the lot width, the lot coverage, the pervious area. The project is 3 different buildings, north, central, and southern towers. All 3 of those are 83.5 feet tall, so we meet the height. And as you can see, we're also providing more than the minimum required parking. We are in a split zoning in B3 and B4. We're in the commercial land use designation. We're not requesting variances or adjustments or deviations from code. We've been through a very rigorous review process, and the 53 affordable units are the ones that we're designating as flex. So the commercial component of our project is just over 4,000 square feet. We are providing 166 efficiency or studio units, 173 one-bedroom units, and 32 bedroom units. You could see the breakdown of the units per tower and the parking spaces as well. We're providing lots of amenities, including a dog park, a cabana and pool, some tenant storage, a fitness center, a yoga room. There's a jogging path that goes around pretty much the whole project. We're providing co-working space, and we're also providing balconies for all the units. So this is the architectural site plan, just so that you can get an idea of the space and the green space. In the middle is the central tower, don't know if you could see my cursor, but this is where the commercial space is up against Northwest 31st, and back here is the pool and the dog park. This is a much busier, more dimensioned site plan. And the landscape plan, while it looks very lush, the key takeaways are we're providing 9 species of trees, 4 species of palm trees. We're relocating 4 existing trees, preserving 1. We're providing 26 species of shrubs and ground covers, and it looks really, really lush. And so these are just some snapshots of the ground and typical floor plans for each one of the towers. There's the central tower, and this is the southern tower. These are the elevations that you're going to see from Northwest 31st, and I believe we're following a very similar color palette and material palette as Aviara East. And these are some massing views. This is the view from 31st. This is the view from the canal in the rear. And these are just some interior views. So to close up, our project meets both the standards for granting a flex allocation and the site plan. Both of those, or the collection of both of those standards are in detail justified in your backup in the project narrative. We did have not only our pre-app, but we went through 4 different DRC meetings. As you can see, we've been in this process for almost a year now. We are scheduled for next Tuesday to be reviewed by the Architectural Appearance Committee. We have obtained our preliminary SCAD, and that is also in your backup. We are not objecting to any of staff's conditions. And before I get into the neighborhood meeting, we do want to thank staff for working with us so much. Like I said, it's been a year, but they've been really great in helping us through this, and we appreciate the support. So we had a meeting, a virtual meeting with President Phyllis Smith of the Collier City Civic Association before she placed us on an agenda. We had that meeting. We have their support. There's that support letter, I believe, in your backup. I have copies if you need them. There was no objection to the project, and you should also have a summary of that meeting in your backup as well. And that concludes my presentation, and I have, like I said, the team here for any questions.
Okay, so if at this point, if we ask any questions of the applicant, it should be really about the flex, not about the site plan at this point. But does anybody have any questions on the flex allocation? Seeing none, does anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion of this, the flex portion of this project. And with that, if there are no questions, the chair will entertain a motion on item number 3.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mrs. Smith.
I'd like to make a motion that the board finds competent, substantial evidence has been presented for the flex units that satisfies the criteria and move approval of the items subject to the, was it 4 conditions?
3.
3 conditions.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any questions on the motion? Comments? No? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on item number 3.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Marianne Edge,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So item number 4, yes, we're changing pitchers in the middle of this game. And up comes are the newly married Mrs. Gratzer. Okay. You're in charge. I bet your husband doesn't say that either, does he? Go ahead, before I make any bad comments. Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble.
All right. Thank you, Chair and board members. Lauren Gratz with Development Services. I will go through this quickly, just because you guys have seen most of this already. This is just the general location within the city. It is south of MLK Boulevard and just east of Northwest 31st Avenue. This is a general aerial of the property. As mentioned, it is south of McDonald's. To the east is a couple schools. To the west are hotels. The applicant is requesting major site plan approval in order to construct the 369 residential units, 3 buildings that are 8 stories, 4,625 square feet of office space. The height is meeting the height standards at 83.5 feet. They did go to the DRC 4 times. They are scheduled for the March 5th Architectural Appearance Committee, so that will be next week. And the zoning is commercial, as well as land use. So should the board find that the application has provided competent substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for major site plan approval, the Development Services Department recommends approval of the major site plan subject to the following conditions and comments. And I do want to note that as shown here on the slide and that is shown on the staff report, I've discussed this condition with the fire reviewer and it's been deemed sufficient. It's regarding parking spaces for the fire truck. So number 1, the plat shall be amended prior to building permit approval to address the following. The county's finding of adequacy on the plat note expired and shall be updated. The site plan proposes an exit only in the northwest corner of the site plan where the plat permits entrance access only and shall be revised on the plat. And the plat note restricts these parcels to commercial and it should be revised to allow residential as well. Number 2, by the time of building permit approval, provide the recorded declaration of restricted covenants establishing the income restricted affordable housing in accordance with the flex application. Number 3 is provide the final SCAD approval from Broward County. Number 4 is any project consisting of phasing shall have all site amenities and landscaping installed on site prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. Number 5 will strike. Number 6, update the total parking counts for each building on all the landscape, irrigation, and subted plans to be consistent with the site plan numbers. Number 7, show the proposed speed bumps on all civil and fire site plans. And number 8 is the standard conditions of approval, which include the applicant shall provide evidence of compliance with the sustainability narrative. The plans are subject to compliance with all applicable code requirements, including the DRC comments. Landscape and irrigation plans must comply with all zoning code requirements, and a copy of the subted plan approved by BSO shall be submitted for time of building permit. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions on the site plan for staff.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? I have one, and I just want a little bit of a clarification on number 6. It says update the total parking counts. Are they inconsistent? They're not significant.
No, it's a minor comment. All of the plans essentially copied and pasted a lot of information, and so when one plan was changed, these ones just weren't updated to reflect the new counts, and so it's just like a grayed out area that just needs to be updated.
Okay, so when they change them, it's not going to change the whether they comply or not. Is what we're saying.
No, it's not about the
They
compliance, it's
significantly
just,
over the.
Yeah, consistency on the plans to make sure that the information is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of have that on the record because does anybody else have any questions? And if not, I guess we could bring the applicant back up, at least, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to present, but you probably at least should put on the record the acceptance of this, I guess it's now 7 conditions, not 8, it's now 7 conditions.
That's correct.
Okay, so what's left is 7 conditions. That's not a problem with your client.
Do I need to say my name and everything?
Mrs. West, go ahead.
Sure. Paula West, Plan West, for the record. We have no objection to staff conditions.
Okay. Specifically, number 4. Okay, I just want to put this on the record because that can get down to the end and people have to realize that they still have to do all those amenities even if they're only COing the first tower and stuff. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to your client and whatever, because that usually becomes a problem near the end. So
Yeah,
anyway.
we're good with that.
Okay.
I don't know if you may have seen, but there is a plan in the backup that is a phasing plan that we've been working with Wade on, so if we need to tweak anything, we'll work with him.
Okay. All right. That's good. Good by me. It's not my problem. So, Okay, anybody else have any questions? Anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and if there are no other questions, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 4.
I'll make a motion.
Yes, Mrs. Kovac, go ahead.
Since the applicant has provided competent, substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for a major site plan, I move that we approve the major site plan with the 8,
Now 7.
with the 8,
7.
They're now 7 now.
excuse me?
It's now 7
Oh,
conditions.
7
Okay,
conditions, thank you.
okay.
Number 5 is off.
Right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments on the motion? I just had a couple of quick things. First of all, I want to thank Mrs. Smith for working on the 31st Avenue Task Force. This is a project, and it was a pointed project as we looked at this particular corridor, a piece of property we've been really anxiously awaiting the potential for, and this project, in my opinion, is really should be very outstanding. And I think it's very important that this corridor gets redeveloped, which I've said several times over the period that you guys were looking at it. So anyway, that's my comment. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, seeing none, Bobby, you want to call the roll on item number 4, please?
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Marianne Edge,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Okay. Moving on
Thank you, board members.
to item number 5. Live Indigo, Pompano Beach. PNC 23-124039. Location is 777 Isle of Capri Circle. Mr. Weems, you're up tonight.
How nice. Good evening, Max Weems, Principal Planner Development Services. This is for the major site plan consideration Live Indigo. The subject property is located in the southwest corner of the Live Resorts PCD. It's framed by Powerline Road and a private roadways known as the Loop Road, Main Street, as well as a new private roadway to be constructed. The I did my notes wrong. Look at that. The, sorry. The property has a Regional Activity Center, RAC land use designation, and is zoned planned commercial development, which permits this residential use. The site plan was reviewed by the Development Review Committee most recently on January 3rd of 2024 and is scheduled to be reheard by the Architectural Appearance Committee on March 4th of 2024. The district was rezoned to planned commercial development with an adopted master plan in 2020, which has ongoing projects. Notably, we have in the northwest corner a retail development with a grocery store, the Top Golf facility along Racetrack Road, an industrial with 1 million square feet of industrial along Racetrack Road and the TSX tracks, the Tri-Rail tracks, and the live venue and casino improvements in the middle of development, a lake expansion. There's a temporary storm basin in this location, if you can see my mouse. And then tonight, we're considering a new residential development in this portion of the site. The applicant, they're consisting major site plan approval in order to construct 9 residential multifamily buildings with 423 residential units, varying from studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom layouts. It's 524,979 gross square feet. There are 3 separate building types, varying between 2-story and 5 stories, as well as 6 ancillary 1-story private garage bay structures, a centralized clubhouse, and amenity areas for passive green, a dog park, pickleball, pool, and so lots of amenities. The total footprints of the buildings, it's 123,615 square feet on a 555,680 square foot site, about 12.78 acres. The site is a part of the overall 222 acre planned development as previously described. The review standards are provided for reference. The site plan is found to be compliant with the 12 review standards once the conditions of approval are satisfied. Here is the site plan showing the 9 buildings described, the varying between 2 and 5 stories, the 6 garage buildings, and the clubhouse and amenities. Pursuant to Section 155-2304C of Code, the Development Services Director has compiled the department's reports from the Development Review Committee meeting, which are recorded on file with Development Services. Should the board find that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, which they are available to provide a full presentation after this, to satisfy the review standards of major site plan, the Development Service Department recommends approval of the major site plan subject to the following comments and conditions. I do have one correction, that is to condition 5A, which I will read into the record once we get there. 1, the PCD requires a 10-foot minimum buffer along Power Line Road and a 50-foot buffer along the southern boundary of the PCD. The site plan proposes a development within Development Area A, identified in the PCD. The buffer within Development Area A, where abutting the subject site, shall be installed prior to issuance of the first certificate of occupants or completed by December 31st of 2024, whichever comes first. 2, the private road along the north boundary of the proposed development, I'll show that here, along the north boundary of the proposed development is a separate scope of work. The road is required for access to the site and must be completed prior to CO issuance. 3, obtain a superior design alternative from the Architectural Appearance Committee in satisfaction of the requirements of Section 155-5602, C4, base, middle, and top, to enhance the tops of buildings of 3 or more stories to include 2 or more of the following features. A, 3-dimensional cornice treatments with integrally textured materials such as stone or other masonry or differently colored materials. B, sloping roofs with overhangs and brackets. C, stepped parapets, or D, aligned openings and articulations. 4, provide details and elevations for all perimeter fences and walls and the access gates. And 5, standards, conditions of approval and or specifications required prior to building permit zoning compliance permit issuance. A, the Regional Activity Center land use requires that 15% of the total number of units will need to be reserved as affordable units, or the developer may provide an in lieu of fee for every unit. The units may be reserved by declaration, or the appropriate affordable housing fee for every unit may be paid to the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. B, park impact fees to be assessed at time of building permit approval. C, the applicant shall provide evidence of compliance for the points used for sustainability narratives as submitted to the DRC by time of building permit approval in accordance with Table 155-5802, sustainable development options and points. D, plans are subject to compliance with all applicable code requirements, including but not limited to DRC comments issued for the site plan. E, landscape and irrigation plans must comply with all zoning code requirements as verified by the city's Urban Forestry Division. And F, a copy of the subted plan approved by the Broward Sheriff's Office must be submitted for zoning compliance permit approval. And just as a point of clarity, condition 3 requires the approval from the Architectural Appearance Committee. They have submitted that superior design alternative, and that is scheduled to be heard at this month's AAC meeting. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant's available for presentation. I'll be available for comments and questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of staff? I have one general one. I don't know why this dawned on me right now, but you have one condition where the private road, it's number 2, private road along the north boundary of the proposed development is a separate scope of work.
Correct. It's anticipated that this will be completed by the master developer, the PCD, not the applicant that's here tonight.
Okay, so that's talking about the top road. The loop road that goes around the other side of the majority of this property, that's actually under permit now?
It is in permitting.
Or it's in permit now?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry. They have approved permits. They are under construction.
Okay.
So yes, those would also, I'm anticipating
Okay.
completed by time.
Okay, well, I guess that was my point. it happened to dawn on me if that road was hanging out there by itself and wasn't tied into the loop road, it would kind of be a dead-end road.
Yes, right.
At this point.
Right, both Loop Road and the
Okay.
new road are required for access.
Okay, but you're already aware of, because you brought up my second question, which was, so the Cordish people are doing the roads, this developer's just doing the piece inside of that.
Yes, that is my understanding.
Okay, I'll let them go ahead and put that on the record when they come up, but, okay. Anybody have any other questions before the presentation from the applicant? Okay, applicant, please.
Good evening, Chairman, board members. My name's James Kahn with Keith and Associates, representing the applicant. I also have with me here a landscape architect, engineer, and the project developer. If I can't answer the questions, I'll be calling on them.
Okay.
Let's see here. Clicker. Okay. So you can see the little aerial of the site here, the project site. Indicated in red. We're at the bottom of our project down on Powerline Road. There we go. So this will give you might have saw this in Max's also. We're at the bottom there where it says Indigo Pompano Beach, where the loop road is. On the top, you've seen a lot of these projects come through in the past year or so. The new retail development, Top Golf, the industrial to the rear, and the venue, casino, and garage. And so this is the portion of the RAC that has the first residential component. This is starting the creation of the village, the urban village. So this is an integral part of getting this whole project moving forward, and it's a very important key component of the project. So you can see that the whole project is 221 acres, and we're about 12.8 of that, and this is a 423-unit project. Here's a colored version of the site plan. You can see along Powerline Road, which is on the edge of the property there, we have 50 feet of landscaping in the right-of-way that we're doing, plus the sidewalk is in that area. Then we have another 20 feet before we get to the first building. And those first two buildings, those narrow two buildings, are the lower story buildings along Powerline Road. And as you go back, they get higher into the project. So you can see that the other buildings surrounding the perimeter kind of frame the whole project. They're curved at the corners. They kind of frame the whole project as an urban design village. Interior to the project, there are those little one-story sliver parking garages that there's 6 of them, I believe. As you can see, towards the middle of the project, we have the clubhouse and the pickleball courts. And along the southern portion of the project, the big green area is a buffer. It's only required to be 50 feet by the PCD, but we have about 160 feet in width there, narrowing down, so we're providing a really good buffer in that area. This is just a little diagram showing circulation around the site. We have circulation through the entire site, plus around the perimeter of the site. You notice that there are connections from the sidewalk to the units along the perimeter of the building also, kind of liven up the whole streetscape. The little orange areas that you see on there are pavers that were put in for traffic calming as a result of the AAC requirement. We went ahead and put those in. These are just some of the typical buildings. As you can see on the table there, we have the majority of the units are 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 43%. The next would be 2 bedroom, 2 bath. So this is geared towards your modern professional type people. There's only 40 3 bedroom, 2 bath. So you can see that we're gearing this to a certain segment of the population that looking for that active lifestyle in this type of village that's going to be created there. Here you see a concept of the clubhouse. This is from the inside, looking towards the back of in the project in the clubhouse. There's all kinds of amenities, just a few of them, club room, game room, lobby, lounge, pool, cabanas, fire pit, lawn open space. You can see a little picture of the pool in plan, plus you can see the elevation of the back of the building. So this is big open space area for all the residents. I should note that that this is a very secure project. The SEPTED plan, it goes above and beyond anyone I've ever seen. This is very secure, has fencing, cameras everywhere, key fobs to get into all the buildings. Everything that could be done to make this a secure village interior is provided, and as part of the SEPTED plan that the sheriff will be approving. There's a little additional areas where the pickleball courts are. We also have a little dog park over on the side. Plus, you can see it on building number 3, which is up in the corner. There's an outdoor little area too where we provide some open space for just private recreation, sitting, chilling out, there'll be benches and it's just a good open area. But we do have the dog park and some pickleball courts. This is the clubhouse from the street on the main street in the back on the east side. It's very modern architecture, compatible with everything that's being done in the village. This is the lower, what we call the townhomes, but they're not really townhomes because they're not individually rented. They are rented, they're not fee simple. So they call them townhomes, but it's not a townhouse development. They are 2-story rental units, but this is what would be along those narrow buildings on Power Line Road. And you can see the green area in front. And this is typical of the perimeter buildings along the edges of the street. Modern architecture, wraparound balconies, all the aesthetics that the board is looking for in the architecture, which will be going back to the committee, I believe it's next week. Interior shot, this is where that little passive park is in front of one of the buildings inside the village. And it's a gated community for access, and this is the one on the north side of the private road. It'd be very similar on the other side on the loop road. And that's pretty much our presentation. If you have details, I have other people here that might be able to answer any questions. The architect, landscape architects, but this is a key component of starting the whole regional activity center as far as the residential. This is the first component, 423 units, and it's just the beginning of this whole village, and this is, we believe, a key step in activating this whole project, and we look forward to your support.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions that you want? Mrs. Smith, go ahead.
Sure. Are these going to be rentals or for purchase?
No, these are rental.
Rentals, okay. The buffer area, I mean, you guys have a mountain over there between Cypress Bend and the property. Is part of that a berm that's going to stay there to give a buffer to the Cypress Bend area?
I want to say yes, and I
It's the other side of the road, I
can
think.
have what my landscape, I believe there's also a wall there, if I'm not mistaken.
That's farther east, isn't it?
They need to come up.
Yeah.
So the mound-
You'll have to come up and put it on the record, please.
Yeah, so it'll be completely, buffered with
Okay.
landscaping, and I believe is it an 8-foot, is it a wall there?
Let him get to the microphone, please.
There's not really.
My name is Chris Andrioni, address 301 East Atlantic Boulevard. I am the civil engineer and project manager for this. So to answer your question, we have a slide showing, let's go back to that. So you're asking about the southern buffer here?
Yes, I am.
So at 160-foot dimension, are you thinking that's a big berm?
That's where you guys have sand now.
Currently,
So I didn't know if
it's an
any of
active
it was
construction
staying.
operation. We have a representative from Port Issues on site all day, every day, managing the construction. As we said earlier, they're excavating the lake. It's an ongoing project. The fill that you're seeing as you drive by there nowadays is just a stockpile of fill that's kind of being left over from the lake, and I believe we're trucking it out as possible, and it will also be used for fill for this project, whatever's excess.
So the buffer on the south side won't be hilled up. It'll be flat with the wall and landscaping?
160-foot dimension is actually slated to be a dry pond one day. And on the very south side where you see the landscaping, that's a 8-foot wall with landscape buffer in order to meet the PCD requirements on the south side, which is right here. So if you see where the green line is on the south, that's what the 8-foot wall is with the landscaping is we're trying to meet the southern buffer requirement.
Okay.
So to be clear, so the green line is the termination point of the 8-foot wall, and then what, a 20-foot wall starts in the industrial end or
Yeah,
something?
that's the
like that?
purple line to the right, and
Okay.
they'll construct that as part of the industrial parcel project.
Project, okay. So as part of this project, how much of that green wall has to be built?
All of it, I believe.
So,
All of it,
yes? Okay.
or 50 foot of it, right? All of it.
Okay, so it'll be built all the way to wherever the 20-foot wall is going to start.
Correct, and then the industrial parcel folks, which they're going to be months behind these folks,
When-
will build the rest of it.
When you said the lake, are you're talking about the temporary retention pond?
No, that's built, done. That's taking care of the drainage for Topgolf until the main lake.
The big lake over in the
That's
industrial?
what's in construction right now. It's about done.
Oh.
So
Which one are you talking about? The one that says lake?
the one that says lake, that's in construction now. It's about done.
Okay.
The fill generated from that is being stockpiled on this site that we're talking.
You guys could have the tallest, property in Broward County, for sure, if you left
I
it.
believe it's 70 feet tall.
No, I'm just kidding. It's a pretty good-sized pile. I was there today.
We'll call it
It's a lot of fill.
It's a 12.5 acre lake, 20 feet deep.
Yeah.
And, we're moving it around.
Yeah.
We'll use it.
No, I'm sure you will. I'm sure they'll need pad fill and whatever. Okay, did you have any other?
I have one more question.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
On condition 3, with having to change architecture beyond the 3-story buildings and higher, is what we're seeing today what you changed to, or what are you going to change to?
Yeah, I'm going to let the architect speak for that.
Good evening. Beatrice, sorry, I have a cold. Beatrice Hernandez, BCARQ. I'm the architect for the project. What you're being presented here today is what we're going to be presenting at AAC as an exceptional design alternative solution to meet the standards.
Okay. Just wondered if it would be different. Thank you.
No, it would not.
Feel better.
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Kovac, go ahead.
Will the roadway that is going to be used by the industrial site be shared with the residential units, or will there be another roadway?
The roadway used by the industrial, are we talking about, I wish I could point.
think there's two different functions, so you may want to talk about both functions over in the industrial area.
All right, so what we're calling Loop Road, that's in construction now. That's not intended to be used by the industrial site. The industrial site is building their own private road on their site. They are parallel on this image. They might look like one road. They're separated by a landscape buffer, two separate roads.
Okay, thank you.
The biggest point of that is that there will be no tractor trailers from the industrial site at all going over on that loop road.
Correct.
It'll only be service to whatever,
They
to
have
Live
their own-
Resort or whatever comes
Correct.
on Main Street or something, but there won't, the tractor trailers that are going to be involved in the industrial area will not go over there.
Correct.
Over my
They'll be
dead
able to
body.
Access the industrial development from Racetrack Road.
Yeah.
Through that main, we call it Spine Road for now, entrance.
I think that's really important. Okay.
How much parking is there going to be for this plan?
For this site, specifically on site, I got a slide for that. It's 591, if I'm remembering
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
correctly. Yeah, and that does not include the detached garages.
Oh, you have that's a different one, okay.
And so 581.
And then of that, how much of that is going to be for electric vehicles?
Electric vehicles? 20 so far.
Okay. It keeps coming up, so I was just curious about that.
So there is a good point to this, so I want to go ahead and follow up on the parking a second. That parking is, for lack of a better word, what we would call the legal parking, but you have garages,
Correct.
okay? And outside of the garages, typically, if people were storing cars, you would park that are not considered legal spaces. You would, what we call piggyback to them or something like that.
Yeah, so they were.
So you could well go past that calculated number.
Right, we could add
From
42 spaces to this number if you count the detached, or the tandem parking in front of those detached garages.
Right.
You could, but it's not included in the count.
Okay.
Are people going to be assigned parking spots, or is it sort of just open?
Beatrice Hernandez again. The parking is not going to be assigned. The only thing that would be technically would be the garages that would be available for rent. So the space within the garage and directly behind would be allocated to the person renting those spaces. But otherwise, the property itself is open and free to park wherever. And one thing that we do want to note, is the perimeter outside of the site. There's the parallel spaces, which also we weren't considering in our account, and we assume that potentially any visitors that may not want to come through and into the development through the call box, of which we have visitor access through the community, would also be able to use for additional parking.
Are those are on Main Street, not on the Loop Road?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So she's talking about the east side.
Right.
The north-south road.
Correct, along where the clubhouse
I was
is.
going to say, the Loop Road, I don't think has any.
Did I say Loop Road?
No, you didn't. I just wanted to make it clear because the southern boundary of it's the Loop Road,
No,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want them to be confused.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I was confused, I don't know, whatever.
I failed to mention,
Yes.
we do agree with the conditions that staff had.
I was gonna get to that, but I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, Mrs. Edge, go ahead, please.
You mentioned briefly, it was mentioned briefly, the EV charging spaces, and you mentioned 20 as a count. Is that within the total number that you've stated are provided on site?
That's as part of the total number, so 20 spaces of the close to 600 that we have are
With
going to be EV charging.
The plan for those, location-wise, are they all collected in one location, scattered throughout?
We're going to have them scattered throughout. We have at least 2 spaces
Okay.
close to each of the buildings allocated for EV charging.
I think that'll answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
just, did those 2 people, were they sworn in?
I'm
Beginning.
sure that, well, I don't know. Was everybody sworn in?
I was not. I got
Okay.
here right after it was
Okay.
Okay.
sworn in.
Go
So
ahead.
if I need to be sworn in, I'd be more than happy
Yes,
to do so.
please.
Thank you for asking.
Just raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Including the stuff you've already said.
Including what I've already said, yes.
Okay.
Retro 30 minutes ago.
It's retroactively. I run my court different than most people do. Oh, well. Okay. Where were we at? Who wants to go next? Who has other questions? Yes, Mrs. Edge, go ahead.
Just another thing, I'm looking at the color rendering here now, and you've got the dog park on the west side. I noticed there's a label passive park on the sort of east side, I guess it's northeast.
Yes.
Curious, that passive park, what is the intended kind of use programming for that, and would it include folks walking their dog? I don't know, or what else?
Well, the whole community could be open to walking their dogs. We have obviously a dog-specific park to take their dogs off leash and to be able to run around. That park is not programmed for anything in specific. It's more passive in nature than anything else. But it's a nice green space to have.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? I think I'll go ahead and, since I see Mr. Long's here, I'll go ahead. There's a couple of things I just wanted to remind people of discussion-wise. I had a discussion with the urban forester today, and because I drove down the main inbound road today, but I just wanted to reiterate that the new loop road that's under permitting now has different sized trees than that entry road that you have today. Please do not forget that, okay? Because it's very important, and I just wanted to put that back on the record. Also, and I don't know who would answer this, maybe the Cordish folks would, but do we know what the time frame of the temporary pond along Powerline Road is? Is there a, and I'm not asking for a date, I'm just like, is it 6 months, 6 years, is it whatever, what is the program thought right on that?
It's, we're approved, it's there for 1 year, but we may intend on renewing it depending on the pace of construction. A temporary pond needs to stay there for drainage purposes until we have the infrastructure constructed under what we call Main Street that ties everything happening top off to the new lake that was just constructed. So the lake's built, the Main Street Road is about to start construction. Once the infrastructure is tied into the lake,
Okay.
that temp pond goes away. If we have to renew the temporary use,
So the thing that said lake, the lake that says lake on it, that was on the other drawing earlier, that has to be, it's not a CO, but it has to be signed off by whatever, South Florida Water Management, or whoever's handling that.
close it out.
When you close that out, then the other lake would become
Correct.
viably, that could be refilled, or
Right.
whatever.
That the temporary lake along power line is handling mostly Topgolf's drainage, right?
So
When
they're-
Main Street's
Okay,
constructed.
it's their outfall right now, it's
It's not an outfall, it's a dry pond, it perks from the ground.
oh, it's a dry pond, so it actually,
It's a dry
wow.
lake, it's a dry lake. It perks, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Pretty well, yeah.
okay, interesting. All right.
It dries up pretty quickly after a heavy rain of blood.
Yeah, well, this sand does percolate pretty well out there.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, while you're doing that, just for purposes of the record, because I know people are jumping in and out, if you would, when you jump back on the mic, just introduce for purposes of identifying who's speaking. That's
Chris Andrioni.
Okay. And the second thing that I just want to put back out there again, and I know we've talked about this before, and it goes back to something before, and it has to do with the pond. So this is to our friend Mr. Long. When whatever you program into that building, remember we talked about you were going to try to make sure you were going to try to do some type of miniature transit hub thing if you could. And I do not want to leave that because I took a pretty serious tongue lashing after we gave up the the rail station. And so I hope it's not in vain. Let's put it that way, okay? I only like to take one per project, if I can, okay? So anyway, and I appreciate that. By the way, I do appreciate the fact, and I'll put this on the record, all the information that I gave you guys at the end or the beginning of the year and stuff that had to do with this was in a very extended discussion that Mr. Long gave me time and gave me all this information. So I do appreciate that, and because we're trying to keep our folks here and also the public aware of scheduling and stuff out there because of the importance of your project. So there's a very purposeful reason for doing that. So, and I appreciate it. So anyway, does anybody else have anything for the applicants at this time? Seeing none, I don't think, did I open public hearing? I don't think I did. I'll open public hearing at this time if anyone wants to speak. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any other questions or comments before Chair entertains a motion on item number 5? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on item number 5.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mrs. Smith,
I'd
please.
like to make a motion that the board finds that competent substantial evidence has been presented for major site plan that satisfies the review criteria and move approval of the items subject to the 5 conditions provided by staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on item number 5.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Marianne Edge,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and good luck. Keep it up, the good work, folks. Thank you. Okay. With that, we will see if there's any audience to be heard tonight. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, reports by staff. Mrs. Dolan, do you have something for us? A little bit?
Jean Dolan, Development Services. So Fred had requested today that I just walk you through the glitch bill for the Live Local Act that's currently making its way through the legislature. It hasn't been approved yet, but the rumor is it's likely. So we're just going to touch on the highlights. And I did a little thing where I mentioned the effect on our regulations and then what I think it'll be the effect in practice. So the first thing is the process. So they clarified that in addition to no governing board approval, there's also no quasi-judicial boards. So what we'll have to do to our regulation is tweak them to specify that the AAC will not be required during the administrative site plan approval process. Our typical administrative site plan approval process for minor site plans, they still have to go to AAC if it's a new building that's visible from a main corridor. So we'll just have to clarify that they don't have to do that. So they'll just go right to the Development Services Director after they get through the DRC process. So we see really no effect to that in practice because the staff will continue to apply the same regulations administered by the quasi-judicial boards to the project. So it's not like the regulations won't still be applied. They just won't have to go to that hearing. Okay, the second thing is density. So this new glitch bill just specifies that the highest density that you have to apply to these projects doesn't include any kind of bonuses. And that has no effect on our regulations or in practice because we always assume that. The intensity, they added that if you're using FARs, you can't limit the project by that. You have to give it up to at least 150% of your maximum FAR. FAR stands for floor area ratio. So the effect on our regulations and in practice is none because we don't use FARs in our code. We will still use our lot coverage. FAR is really a function of lot coverage and height. All it is measuring your floor plate and multiplying it by how many floors you can have. That's what your FAR is. So they'll still have the maximum height, which is generally 105 feet. But the lot coverage will still apply based on what actual zoning district that they're in, which ranges from 35% for B1 up to 65% for I1. So anyway, that really doesn't have any effect on our code or our practice since we don't use FARs. So they clarified the height a little bit. So they're saying if there's single-family homes on two sides, then you can look at height differently. It's not the maximum height within a mile like it was before for everything else. So really, the effect on our regulations is we'll have to mention that it's not just the 1 mile max height anymore. But in practice, it could be good if we do have a site that has a couple of sides with single-family homes adjacent. But the good part is really just based on the height of the underlying zoning, because if you read that whole section, what will apply is the currently allowed height on the site, because it says it's going to be this, this, or this, or the currently allowed height on the site. So that's really what's going to rule. Our allowed heights, it depends on what zoning district they're in. So you can only use live local on commercial or industrial land use and zoning. So the heights will range from B1's as low as 50 feet, I1 is as 45 feet, and then everything else is 105 feet. So unless we don't, we have very little B1 in the city. So the chances of having a live local act on B1 is pretty small. If we have an I1 project, it'll now be down to 45 feet instead of the 105, which is what it would be if it was within a mile. So that's good. We'll have a little bit more control. But we don't really have much I1 that's got single family on two sides. So I don't really see that ever happening. So I really don't think the effect of that is going to be anything, because even along the B3 corridors, we don't have a whole lot with single family adjacent on two sides. So it's a little better, but I don't know in practice we're ever going to have that circumstance. Now the one part that is a little bit concerning, but probably not in practice, is the parking stuff. So the first one says there's a 20% reduction within a half a mile of a major transportation hub, which is defined as, it could just be a bus station, but then it says you have to have access to other forms of transit. So I don't think we actually have any of these major transportation hubs, but it's kind of sketchy the way they define it. But you also have to have alternative parking available within 600 feet if you use that 20% reduction because of this transportation hub. That part we're not too concerned about. We already allow a 15% reduction if you're within 1,000 feet of a bus stop. So we give 15% reductions so easily. Almost everything's within 1,000 feet of a bus stop. So to bump it up to 20% is not really that significant. And they have to identify something within 600 feet that's for an alternative, even though it doesn't have to meet the full 20% reduction. That part is probably harder than just taking our 15% reduction because of the bus stop. Interestingly, we have this awesome section in our code already, 155.5102J and K, which is a whole section for what you can do if you want alternatives to off-street parking, and show how you're going to handle your traffic management with lower parking standards. So if somebody comes in and wants to use that 20% reduction and says, oh, well, there's this alternative over here within 600 feet, we'll be like, oh, good, we already have a section that addresses that. All you got to do is get a shared parking agreement, and you can use that. And we have that in our code now. So we kind of already are set up to handle the whole 20% and the adjacent, so on and so forth. The part that is a little more concerning is no parking is required in a transit-oriented development if the project is mixed use. And I really first want to just focus on if the project is mixed use, because to me that is the intention that they're just not going to park the non-residential part. Because if it's 100% residential, they have to meet your parking regulations. So I don't want to panic over that no parking, because it sounds so scary. Most developers are going to park their building. If it's a residential building, they're not going to be able to get a bank loan if they don't have it parked. It's going to look like it's not going to be financially feasible. I don't see a whole lot of people coming in not parking their residential. So I really do think that if we see developers providing a little bit less parking than our code requires, it's really going to be focused on the mixed use aspect, which really, if you have a business that fails because nobody goes there because they can't park, then you're probably not going to have a whole lot of demand for that space. So until we do have good walkability, that space will probably just remain empty. But anyway, I just did want to point out a couple things. about this 1555102J and K. We already have ways that you can, strategies that you can use if you want to reduce your off-street parking. And we also have a whole section on transportation demand management where you can provide shuttles, or you can have an on-site manager that helps with carpooling. And there's a lot of ways to already get your parking reduced. And I think that section of our code is pretty good, and actually could really help our transit-oriented. If we ended up with shuttle service to all the transit instead of on-site parking, that could actually be good, and this could be a stimulus for that to start happening more. There's another option that I was thinking about that, you know, we haven't really talked about, but just as a brainstorming kind of session, if they are resisting any kind of demand management or these parking reduction strategies we've already identified, or we could do this in addition, we could require the developer to record a declaration of restrictions identifying the units that prohibit auto ownership and monitor those annually, just like we do for the affordable. So even a Senate Bill 102 project, or what Live Local project, still has to do a declaration of restrictions that say that they're going to do affordable, and that gets recorded in the public record. So if they're going to have units that have no parking, because they're not parking 100% of their units, we would require that those same units would be identified in this declaration of restrictions. And then if we end up having parking problems around that building, and it's like, oh, we've definitely got all these people just parking willy-nilly all around this building, we could send code enforcement out there to evaluate, you know, are the units that were dedicated or supposed to be dedicated to people with no cars, are they actually owning cars and they're causing this parking problem? Then we could have code enforcement go in and look at that. That was just an idea of one of the ways we could manage that. I think it's going to be a wait and see kind of thing. If we end up getting somebody who wants to use Senate Bill 102 in our transit-oriented districts, which are already very generous in terms of our entitlements, so I don't know why they would need to do, you know, use the Senate Bill 102 or Live Local. But if they did, we'll just need to monitor and see how that goes, and knowing that we can fall back on a section of our code we already have on how to handle it, I think that's comforting in itself. So that's kind of the summary of there's other things in that bill, but they don't apply to us. The thing about the airport zones, we already do that. We don't have any military bases, you know, so some of those things in there are just not relevant to Pompano. So I didn't put them in, but it's sad because the glitch bill started out as something really good. And it just turned into what it is now, so it's less exciting, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see how things play out. Okay. We have had no projects. We have no Live Local projects. And by the way, none of this changes our concentration of poverty objectives and strategies. So we're still going to continue to apply where only 50% of deed-restricted affordable is allowed, where we already have concentrations of poverty. So that is really our main policy objective in Pompano, is to make sure we don't continue to concentrate that low-income housing in the same area. And I think we've got a really strong protection against that, and there's nothing in this bill that would make us halt doing that.
Okay, great. Thanks for the update. Anybody have any comments? No? Okay. Is there any other report? Is that it? No report? Okay. Reports on this end? No reports? All right. I think that takes us to board member discussion. Mr. Clausewitz, anything?
Always nice to be here, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry?
I say, always nice to be here.
Oh, okay, good. I'll use my good ear next time. Okay. This is Kovac.
No, I have nothing tonight.
Okay. Mr. Fisher.
No report.
Okay. Mrs. Smith.
I just have a comment that it was exciting to have a property approved today that was benefited from the 31st Avenue Task Force. So that was cool to see that come through.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Okay. Mrs.
It'll really make a landscape change over there, too.
Oh,
oh my gosh.
Well, I won't go in. I'll wait until my turn.
Okay,
Go
you
ahead,
can
Mrs.
have
Edge.
your turn.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay. Mr.
None
Lewis?
tonight, thank you.
Okay. To add on to what you were saying, it's a while since I've been through there, and man, there's a lot of, there's other properties, there's townhouses and stuff on 31st Avenue. I mean, the face of 31st Avenue could really change very quickly if this project gets underway and the county does whatever the county's going to do with theirs. It would be really, it could be quite a face change. It's amazing when you plan something and it happens. It's like, wow, we did that. It's kind of cool. Anyway, that's it for me. And with that, Mr. Clausewitz, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on behalf of the remaining staff and all the members of the board, I move we adjourn.
Okay. So moved.